Hey, fellas.
Hello, hello.
Hey.
Hello, Adam, and hello, viewers and listeners. Welcome, everyone, to the inaugural podcast or episode of the Mixed Nuts podcast. A lot of you know us already from some of our previous work on some live streams. There might be some newer folks as well. If so, welcome to everyone, new or not. This whole thing came around because we wanted to really get together and dive into forms of poker that don't get a lot of love, being the more mixed game variants. There is a good amount of content on No Limit Hold'em. I think everyone's seen that, watched videos, heard podcasts, read books. There's just not as much on some of the mixed game variants, and we're hoping to change that and give you guys as much information as we can to make sure that you are as feared at the tables as you possibly can be. Before we jump into that, I wanted to give a quick introduction of all of us, and we'll get into a little bit more about us and our experience here in a little while. But for right now, my name is Zach. I am joined by two of the finest players that I know, Mike and Adam. Fellas, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Zach. Thank you for the intro.
Of course.
We are the Mixed Grill Podcast.
We are the Mixed Grill Podcast. We absolutely are. And we are the best Mixed Grill Podcast. Oh, my goodness gracious. For the first couple of episodes here, we're going to be covering the game on the Mixed Grill Podcast of Pot Limit Omaha 8 or better, providing a high-level synopsis and an in-depth analysis of the game, both of those to give as comprehensive of a view as possible of this great game that we're playing. We conducted a poll, which Adam will speak on here in a little while, and this was the game that the most people wanted to hear about. So hopefully we'll be able to give you guys at least a little bit of information to help your games out a bit, and ours as well as we go along the way. But we aren't going to be able to do any of that without knowing exactly how to play Pot Limit Omaha 8 or better. A real quick synopsis of the rules. I know a lot of listeners do already know, at least a high level thought of the rules, so we won't go too deep into this. The game is played a lot like No Limit Hold'em in the sense that there is a flop, turn, and river on every hand. You are dealt 4 cards instead of 2. The concept and the goal is to have the best high card hand, which is exactly what you think it is, and the best low card hand, which is the best 5 cards with a rank of 8 or lower. The worst 5 unique cards, I should say, the lowest 5. Ace 2, 3, 4, 5 being your best possible low, and subsequently also a pretty good high, giving you a 5 high straight. I know that the game is not as popular as we, the three of us, wish it was, but I know at least, Adam, you've been playing for quite some time, right?
This particular variant I've been playing over 10 years. PLO8.
Excellent.
And some other variants have grown in popularity. I've only been playing those in recent years, such as Big O, but a very closely related game.
How would you rank it amongst the variants that, because I know that you've played several variants. How would you rank it against all the other variants that you've played of poker?
Rank it as how I feel about it, my passion for it, or enjoyment that is derived from it, or
both. How much how would you, if you were on a desert island and you could only play, some variant, how would this rank? Yeah.
If I was on a desert island, it would be up there in a top 3 must have games to play.
Excellent.
Definitely
Mike,
top
what about
3.
Yeah.
Mike, I'm gonna be the newbie here for some of the mixed stuff. I haven't been playing PLO8 for very long. Really, just kind of in the last year since the started playing games with Adam. So it's been fun. I've enjoyed getting to know a little better. I haven't played just pretty much Hold'em for over 10 years or whatever. And then, having some new games to digest has been fun. As far as where I'd rank it in the Desert Island rankings, it probably makes the top 5. I haven't done a definitive rankings, but it's up there. It's definitely a good one to get to know and have some fun with.
Zach, what about you? You know what I'd really like to ask you is, where does it rank in the games you've played the most? Obviously, you've played No Limit Hold'em the most.
Right. I would say for me, it's probably kind of similar to you, Adam, in the top 5. I've always been partial to the Omaha-based games, whether that's Pot Limit Omaha High, Big O, which is the 5-card variant of the Pot Limit Omaha 8 or better. It's even Limit Omaha High-Low, or Limit Omaha High-Low rather, is one that I played a lot too. So any of those variants I think are going to rank pretty highly for me.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I really like the Omaha variants, and then I'd probably say next for me would be the draw variants and the stud variants coming in last.
Good deal.
Mike, you kind of like the stud games a little bit, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Especially Raz for some reason. I don't know. Mostly because the exposure I have to stud is playing in tournaments, and I feel like I kind of got a pretty quick grasp of some straightforward ways to play those game types, particularly the Raz and the stud high. Stud high-low not as much, but one or the other. I feel like I got a decent grasp on as far as basic concepts and some not terrible strategies.
Yeah, for sure.
Not a big fan of the draw games so far, but maybe that'll change as we get into this.
Yeah, maybe I can change your mind. I think that that'll be the main focus of our pod is, let's just talk strategy. Let's get it all out in the open.
All right.
Absolutely. And there's so much strategy, that we have to cover for all games, including PLO8. That I think we can go ahead and jump into the first concept that we're going to discuss, which is the first concept that most people would think about, which is starting hand selection. What are you going to play? You've got 4 cards in front of you. Are you going to fold? Are you going to raise, call? What option are you going to take? Adam, well, Zach, I know you've done.
Oh, when you get 4 cards, how can you fold?
Well, I think Adam is going to tell us some very good ways that you can fold 4 cards of any kind.
Well, let me start off by saying, any viewers out there, if you have any questions, post them in the chat. We might answer some questions during the pod and give you some real-time answers. And then secondly, I think that when we're talking starting hand selection, we would first want to talk about some qualities, characteristics of PLO8, which will be the baseline to why we would want to choose a pre-flop strategy that we do. And so one of the big concepts of PLO8 and any like split pot game with more cards is that equities are going to run a lot more close. So that is going to have a little to do, or it's going to have a lot to do with why we do what we do or the strategy we choose in PLO8. So a benefit of it being a big bet game, a pot limit game, is that we can use some larger sizings, and we want to be doing raising and betting, because any chance that we can to deny opponents equity is a benefit for us, because one, we're not splitting pots, and also in reality our opponents have fair equity, but a lot of pressure could make that the ability to call hard, so we can make opponents fold. Anytime we're inducing more folds from opponents who actually have decent equity in the pot is a huge win, because we win an entire pot as opposed to splitting a pot or even losing a pot to them.
If you don't mind, just if you could touch back on, stealing a pot size bets in Omaha compared to Hold'em, say. So if you got like someone who's used to playing Hold'em like me, and you're coming in and seeing all these pot size bets, it's a bit unusual. And you talk about denying equity. So maybe talk a little more about that, like the difference between how often you're going to want to deny equity with large bets in Hold'em compared to Omaha. I think I kind of have an idea what your answer might be, but what would you say on that?
Yeah, I actually would say that our betting strategy is going to be similar to No Limit Hold'em and PLO8. I think that the pot is an option, and it has a purpose and a place for sure, but I don't think that it has to be our absolute sizing. We're going to want to mix a lot of sizings, and I think we'll flesh a lot of that out over time or over the discussion. We'll kind of see some different scenarios of where it's not necessarily needed. You don't have to bet pot, or there's options that are better. So I think that board textures will derive our sizings, and that's definitely something we can talk about and go into great length if we're getting carried away with things. We can go into great length about it. But I think that honestly, using the pot sizing is overused, but for the general population, in my opinion, just from what I've seen. So I've shared my screen, and I think this is a concept, or a little example that conceptually can get us started on the right track. I've got one hand pulled up that's a powerhouse hand, ace, king, 3, deuce, double suited. This is considered the top 1% of holdings in the game. And then I've got total junk on the right, queen, 9, 7, 4, Badoogie. Absolute trash hand. But it's pulling 35% equity versus one of the powerhouse hands. So in reality, our equity share of the pot is still so close, whereas in, say, Hold'em, you have the ace, deuce, offsuit versus aces. You're in a 9% situation. Or ace, 6 offsuit is like 9% versus aces. That situation doesn't really happen in this game. So equities are actually running a lot closer than they may seem, but that doesn't mean that we should be getting carried away. So I would say when we get into building our pre-flop strategy, this is like a key concept to keep in mind about why we're doing what we're doing. One thing I see the general population doing commonly is a lot of limping and over limping. What I mean by over limping is one person limps and another person limps. So then you've got the whole table over limping to like a 7-way family pot. But why this is bad is, like we said, a lot of people actually have real equity share. So when we can start the equity denial train as early as possible, it's going to make it a lot more easier for us to deny equity on more like later streets.
Guilty here, like you say, a lot of limping and over limping. I think especially from novice players like myself, like I find it hard to raise anything pre-flop in these high-low games that's not like a 1% hand.
Yeah.
So it feels like to me, like raising one of those, maybe top 5% hands feels like one of those situations in Hold'em where like, I raised Jack 10 suited and the flop came out like queen 6 deuce rainbow. I just wasted my money. What am I supposed to do now? And so it kind of deters us from trying to put more money in with hands that aren't always going to flop super well.
Yeah, and so I think that range composition is going to be the answer to that dilemma. So as long as we're constructing our range with the appropriate holdings, then when we take this aggressive strategy, we flop a lot of equity more often than not, and then we can continue. So looking at the characteristics of starting hands you're looking for is like our first step down that road. And so if you take this hand, the ace, king, 3, 2 as your example, the reason why this is a powerhouse is because of multiple options of drawing to the nuts. So the more you can draw the nuts, the better. So the ace, king, 3, deuce is going to have nut flush potential. It's going to have straight potential, like nut low potential. Broadway would be the nut straight potential, and the so on and so forth. Boats, trips. I mean, it can make all kinds of hands. So the connectedness, suitedness, nuttiness, like all those characteristics of the PLO hands are still prevalent. It's just in a split pot version of it. So you want to have the connected nuttiness suitedness for the low side of the pot as well, like in conjuncture.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that, having both is great. And yeah, those are the kind of hands that, I generally, that's like one of the first things that I kind of picked up on the game is like, oh, you want to be at least drawing to the nuts. You don't want to be drawing to the second or third nuts, as a best case scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, we can get off track so easily because that's a great point and a great idea. We can get down to so many roads just from that comment alone, but drawing to the nuts versus us doing the betting. We want to be the one betting. And it's this kind of ties into like limit hold'em concepts, because in no limit hold'em we can construct a call down range or a call down frequency, and it can work because people love to bluff in no limit hold'em. But the problem in this game is generally people aren't really bluffing. They're bluffing with the nuts. They're betting with a ton of equity. So they're barreling, like, I don't think they have much. Well, they might catch something that is a lot by the end of this thing. So we really have to come with the ammunition to continue. And so in no limit hold'em, because people barrel bluffs, we can put hands to a call down range, comfortably call them down with top pair, and if we know our frequency that we should be calling, it's all well and good. But in this game, similar to limit hold'em, is you want to be denying and betting to protect your equity and deny your opponent's equity. So if the more often we can get on the side of being the aggressor and better, the better. Like, that's a better situation for us. But yes, there will be times where we are calling bets, and how do we approach that? Which I think we've kind of docked that more for like an episode 2 or 3 situation. And that's obviously going to be the hardest part about the game, is playing out of position and calling bets and how to approach that. One thing I wanted to show with this example is, so we've got this junk hand, and I think this is a real good support for the why behind betting, barreling, denying opponent's equity. Is so let's say this Queen 9-7-4 Badugi flops something actually decent for their hand. They flop an open-ended in a pair, and so you see it automatically updates.
This is a live podcast, folks.
Yeah, I think we have a bad beat going on in the background. We've all been there, though.
I'll be back.
So I think what Adam was getting at there was 10-8-4 flop, holding the Queen 9-7-4 offsuit, or rainbow, I should say. You flop open-ended, you flop a pair, you have a decent high draw, or at least it looks like you have a decent high draw. But if you look at the equities, you're only 46% against the ace deuce 3 king, despite the fact that the ace deuce 3 king doesn't have a pair right now, doesn't have a front door draw outside of the nut low draw, but doesn't have a front door straight draw, front door flush draw. Regardless of all of that, because of all of those components and because of the value of back doors, especially in a split pot game such as this, you see that hand has not only the expected value or EV advantage of 54%, but also has an advantage in the percentage of times that the hand will scoop, as in 27%, almost 28%, versus
wow, that's actually
that the
that's not something that I would have intuited on my own. Just looking at that comparison there. Yeah, I mean, besides just drawing to the low, which I think a lot of people would recognize. Oh, I've got a the nut low draw here, with the deuce and the 3 as backup. So, but the scoop potential, yeah, I wouldn't think that that's higher for the drawing hand,
right?
But yeah, I guess it's all those back doors and the overcards that really contribute to that. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I wouldn't have expected that without seeing the numbers, which is why stuff like this is so important. Being able to look at, hand replayers, being able to look at equity calculators, just to see if what you think, if your intuition is correct or not. And for me, at least, a lot of times, I am routinely surprised by that. But Adam, one thing that I was thinking of when you were going through this, we would certainly want to be raising this hand pre-flop, but what if we were raised prior? What if someone in an earlier position raised into us? Is this a hand that we should be three betting? And really, what sorts of hands should we look at putting in our three betting range in this game?
You would be three betting this hand versus any open from any position, but we can drill more into the three betting here in a little bit. But one thing I'll point out about this is that I changed the 8 to a spade. So here you have a rainbow flop, and this hand with the open ender and a pair is in no low draw is pulling 46%. Let's say you give this ace king 3 deuce double suited a flush draw to go with this. There's a 10% reduction in equity. So just slight little changes like that, pulling more high equity, that's just something interesting to note. But really, it's hard for this hand to flop something decent. So as soon as we can start the equity denial train, the better. Because if this player is allowed to realize their equity, they actually do have reasonable chance to share. Even this awful hand has a share equity share. So pre-flop, we want to be overall, we want to be raising first in. So just like Hold'em, we're going to have ranges, and it's important to construct the ranges that we're raising first in. So if you go by normal percentages, the common percentages, that means we're opening the button 40. We're opening the cutoff 30. This is roughly. We're opening the hijack 25, the low jack 20, and the EPs 15 and 10, so forth. So we're talking about how do we build a range that meets that percentage. And so how do we, construct that? What are the characteristics, the qualities, the hands? So one thing I noticed from the population player pool is the overvalue of the ace deuce. Ace deuce is basically like ace king in no limit hold'em, but you can overvalue the ace deuce, and we're not going to play ace deuce 100% of the time. In fact, we don't play all ace deuces until the hijack would be my recommendation. So playing, you can get carried away in this game where you're playing too wide a range from early position, especially if you are overvaluing ace deuce and playing 100% of your ace deuces.
I think that's sometimes where the limping comes in too, because if you've got like a ace deuce rag and you're sitting in middle position, you're like, well, I can't raise this, but I can draw to the nuts. I don't want to throw it away, so I feel like you want to get involved somehow. So limping seems like a good cheap option. If you have a rebuttal, I can't hear it right now.
You rendered him speechless.
Yeah, I think that limping's all well and good if you for the folks with the junkier hands or the weaker hands. So if they get to see it on the cheap, then benefit to them, because
right.
The hand
like maybe like an ace deuce 7-10 with like one suit or something like that.
So I think like the double suitedness and suitedness are going to be how we kind of split our range into folds or opens. So say we get the ace 2 7 10 rainbow, I would say we're folding that to about the hijack or the cutoff. But just adding the characteristic of the suited ace, and then in the sevens a backup low card, I think low jack is reasonable. Definitely opening from the low jack, because if you have a nut suit to go with it. So those kind of qualities are where we're looking to build our range from. So I think from EP, you want to be playing about 10%, and some of the hands that fall into there is going to be opening your ace 3 10-10 with a suit plus, but folding your ace 3 10-10 no suit. So making some of those little characteristics go a long way. But if you have a suited ace, it drastically improves the playability of the flop of the hand, because when you go to flop with suited aces, you flop more nut flush draws, which you get to barrel and bet, deny your opponent's equity because you have enough equity. It's going to make it more possible for you to barrel. So those are the characteristics that we're looking for. The ace deuce rainbows are folds, in my opinion.
Right.
Well, Adam, you touched on, I think we've touched on a lot so far. Touched on equity denial, touched on 3-betting, pre-flop. What do you think would be, a better thing to discuss at this point? Do you think that it would make sense to go into some of the 3-betting ranges that we should be looking at pre-flop? I know that equity denial is more of a concept that we'd be looking at after the flop as well.
So one important thing to note about 3-betting is going to be hard to deny opponent's equity. So one thing we can do is do a little simulation of this up here. But let's say that I have a powerhouse. Let's say I have the ace, the double suited ace, 4-3. So you run the equity on that. It's 60-40. So say the ace king 3 deuce opens from EP and the low jack 3 bets with the ace 4-3 double suited. So they're laying 2-1 if they bet pot, which is a rather large sizing but reasonable in this game. They're laying 2-1, but this player actually has 1.5-1 equity, so they should be calling. They're getting great odds to call. You should never fold. And that's like really kind of the extreme example, but because they're both very good hands. But we can even discount this to be like, say this is the offsuit jack. We don't even have the nut suit. And let's take a look. 37% equity. Comparatively looking at them, it's like this hand is way better. So keeping that in mind, you want to be using a linear 3-betting strategy, which is comprised of all value. So in Hold'em, where you could balance or want to be deceptive or want to have like board coverage with like the 6-4 suited mixed into a 3-bet range, that is not a thing in this game. You definitely want to be weighted towards value because your 3-bets will not garner a lot of folds. As you see, the ace jack 3 deuce is pulling plenty of equity to call against looks like a total monster. And so we bet pot and Hold'em, then that's a large sizing. So for us to be balanced, we would have a polar range composition. And so we would have high value bets and a lot of just total naked bluffs, total air. But in this game, we're betting pot with 0 bluffs. We're just going straight off the value, the top of the chart, down to, if we're 3-betting 15%, these are the 15% best hands you can have. And to give you I can give a little kind of idea of like, we actually probably wouldn't ever really, only like the late positions be 3-betting 15%, but I'll give you a little idea of what a 10% range would look like. So a 10% range would comprise of all your ace XX, so any pocket aces. It would comprise of all your ace 2 and 2 broadways double suited. it would comprise of your ace-3 and 2 Broadways double suited, and it would comprise of your ace-deuce and any Broadway pair single suited, ace-3 Broadway pair single suited, and any ace-3 with an extra wheel card and a Broadway card single suited plus. So that means like ace-2 5-10, ace-3 5-10 with a suit are still all 10% holdings and hands that you should be open raising from EP and 3-betting. So basically,
Okay.
and a good way to think about it is if you know your EP range, then you know you can comfortably 3-bet all those hands from all the other positions versus an open, because you know they're in the 10% range. So as a general guideline. Now, like EP versus EP, you want to play pretty tight, like 5%, just as you would in a lot of the big bet games. So like some of this stuff is totally conceptually the same as the other big bet games, but I think that the linear part is the big difference. Like we're constructing our range very straightforwardly with all really good hands, and then it's just kind of a understanding of what are those good hands, and then understanding how wide are we playing. So if you are playing these hands, how wide are we playing? So if say I'm playing ace deuce, any ace deuce from EP, I'm actually playing upwards of 20% of hands. That's pretty wide. And that's another, I would say that's a pitfall in this game, is to think that it's a slippery slope. So if you think that the ace deuce is a powerhouse, just like equivalent of ace king and no limit hold'em, you know, overvalue it, and then you're actually playing extremely wide from early position, which really in any poker game is unsustainable. You know, we can't play that wide from EP because the odds of running into a better hand are extremely high, as there's still 8 more players left at the table. So, yeah, linear 3-betting strategy. Sizing up, putting pressure on you're really trying to put pressure on the bottom of your opponent's range, deny equity for the rest of the table. That's another big part of the 3-betting strategy, is that if there's a raise in the 3-bet, we've blocked out the rest of the table, and we're going to realize our equity more efficiently, and we're going to deny our opponent's equity more efficiently. The more often you can be heads up the battle of denying equity and winning that scenario against an opponent is drastically increased. If we go,
and I think that's a pretty easy concept for like hold'em players to get a hold of, because it's, you know, it's just like, oh, you know, when I have pocket jacks or pocket queens, I don't want to just flat and let, you know, everybody get in behind me and, you know, crack my big pair. You know, I want to get heads up. I'm going to win more often that way, because more boards are going to be favorable against one or two opponents than against, you know, 4 or 5. I think that's pretty easy one to understand. It's just a matter of, you know, what do those hands look like in this game, because they look a lot different. Like the equivalent of pocket jacks in this game is not pocket jacks.
Right, exactly. So I think in a second episode we could probably drill more in depth into like how we're gonna build our ranges pre-flop. Ryan McGraw just asked in the chat, sounds like pre-flop fold percent is high in PLO8. Well, it's actually identical to no limit hold'em. Strategically, we're just expanding our range in the later positions if our blinds are playing weak, or if our blinds are tough and playing aggressive, we might go a little tighter. So 40% opens from the button and 30% opens from the cutoff, and we're really still 3-betting 15% of hands versus middle position or later position, and we're 3-betting 5 to 10% of hands versus EP. And then you've got some other strategical considerations, like from playing out of the blinds, like if you 3-bet linear value and then you flat everything else, then button versus big blind, button has a massive advantage. So you got those strategical things. And same with, you know, are we 3-betting 100 of our hands from small blind, or do we have some flats, you know? And so there's still a lot of considerations to be made there. But as far as folding pre-flop percentage is really just in line with hold'em, because we're going to be playing a certain percentage of hands. And we're going to be conceptually correct to do so.
Adam, would you say another important component of that top tier of hands is how smooth they're able to draw on certain flop textures? And I guess more importantly, how important do you feel that ability to draw to a smooth hand or a more nutted hand is in your overall composition of a hand range?
Yeah, it's absolutely, it's paramount to the game. You got to kind of construct ranges to where you flop as much equity as possible. So like one of the undervalued hands, it's like the dark horse hand, is like the jack check 4-3 double suited. It's actually a pretty good hand, but I think it's kind of it's underappreciated, or it's not recognized as such. But flopping sets is still a big deal. And so when you flop a high set and the low draw is present, there's a lot of favorable flops still where you flop, say you flop top set of jacks and the low draw is present. So it's, I mean, best case scenario, ace deuce on the flop, and then you flopped a monster. But even if you flop the jack 7-2, you actually really do still have a monster just because you're still pulling the low equity. So a problematic situation is to not have enough low equity, but flopping a big high only hand. So that stuff more probably for a future podcast if you get into situations of like, oh, I flop tons of high equity, but I have nothing else with it. What do I do and how do I play in those situations? And I would say those almost favor the out of position opponents or big blind defenders is like the strategy behind how to play those spots, because they're really going to, those are going to hit the big blind ranges harder. Like say it's a high low board, that's favorable to the big blind.
Yeah, that the flopping, sets in Omaha in general seems like a sticky situation. In my limited play experience,
yes.
I probably lost the most money flopping top set.
Yes,
playing Omaha.
Exactly. So I see one critical thing I see is people overvaluing the king 10-9. That's actually, I mean, we're only playing that on the button, and if it has a suit. And I see people playing the king from EP. King XX is, in fact, I mean, we got to have the ace through ace deuce to play king from EP. And ace 4 king is a fold. I could get behind the ace king 4 double suited from EP, but we're still pushing like territory. It's going to be problematic to play that many hands from early position, especially against aggressive opponents. Now, passive opponents, we can probably raise a little bit more. And so you could probably throw in some more hands like that. But
yeah, and it's funny you say that because, I think like Ryan was in his comment, it seems like we're folding a lot more in PLO8, but it's like, hey, if you're not playing king 9-10 or king jack 9, like, that seems like overfolding, but it's just that there are other hands that are better that look different, to a 2-card player.
Absolutely.
Like the ace deuce 7-10 double suited, like you would probably say that's a better hand than king 9-10.
The ace king what now? Ace king
or like the king 9-10, right? That in PLO8, that's a worse hand than ace deuce 7-10 double suited.
Oh yeah, but far worse. I mean, it's just far worse because they have zero equity to the low.
Right. But I think that's just kind of the thing of like the hands look a lot different. The good hands look a lot different in this game than they do in Hold'em. Even though, and I think that probably trips a lot of people up because the game plays just like Hold'em. You get whole cards with a flop, turn, and river. So you're thinking, big pairs, big cards.
Right.
Those are good hands. You just have to train your brain to look for different things. So yeah, if you think, folding king 9-10 is too tight, like, oh, we're over folding, then no, it's because there are tons of other hands that look different that are good that we're playing instead.
Absolutely. So let's run. So I just ran another little simulation, and this is a great example. Remember we said the equities run real close. Well, when we look at the king 9-10 with a single suit versus the powerhouse ace double suited 2 wheels, this is one of the worst equity situations we could be in. 71% for the aces. So remember that hand we ran earlier, it wasn't that far.
Mm-hmm. What if you make one of those aces? What if you make the ace of diamonds the queen of diamonds? That way, it's not a hand that's like obviously dominating the king pre-flop.
Right, but important to note, it wasn't dominating the other hand before.
Right.
Yeah.
It wasn't dominating the ace deuce.
So you want to offsuit queen, or do you still want to be double suited?
Still be double suited. Yeah, make a queen of diamonds.
Yeah, still. So it takes a second. There goes 56.
No,
so now
diamond,
it's pretty.
Diamond,
now it's
diamond's
pretty.
Not hearts.
Yeah,
Diamond's
now it's
not
pretty
hearts.
close.
You made it a heart. It's only single suited now.
Oh, gotcha. It'll probably give like 5% or so. 4%. Yeah, 60-40. So now we're back.
Right. Yeah.
In that
so like looking at that, like a Hold'em player looking at that would be like, huh? Because on first glance, because ace queen versus king. If you're just looking at the big cards,
right?
But that low equity really it changes things.
Yeah. So I wonder what would happen here if we switch to this to be the king 5-4 double suited, and what will that do for us? Oh, it's king 5-4. So we're almost at 50%, and we're almost at even money versus this hand. When we bring in these low cards, these side cards just helped us tremendously. So yeah, we're playing the king. Not so much from EP, but we're playing this king from later positions with these low side cards, and we're adding more as we go along. So those are the hands we're adding in more and more as we play later later positions at the table. So, yeah, and then I'd say there's a lot of limping prevalent in the game, and I'd say from a strategical standpoint of us wanting to exploit that, we should be tightening our range that we pot it pre. We don't want to get carried away with just potting it pre, but we do want to start potting it, getting some folds out of the way, getting as close to heads up as possible, if anything, to heads up, because we have with our strong holdings, and then we're going to put a lot of pressure on all these weaker limpers, and we have no problem with anyone playing with us versus our strong range, because as we've seen, the equities run really close. We're not really worried about anything. If we pot it pre and start putting that pressure on all the weak holdings, getting some folds, making people play a bigger pot out of position with a weak holding, that's benefit to us, and it really doesn't matter if any of them have a monster, because like we've seen, I know I'm reiterating it, but the equities run close. So if they have monsters, so be it. So in the situation in No Limit Hold'em where a person limps EP with the pocket aces trapping and you raise, and now you're in 80-20 because you're raised in late position with the sixes or sevens, got a little over aggressive, and now you're trapped versus the aces in an 80-20. There is no situation like that. It exists in PLO8 as long as we're potting it pre with the ace, queen, 4 deuce suited ace. We have plenty of equity against our opponent's strongest holdings.
Now, once we do that, once we do, pot our strong hands, get calls, presumably from, weaker hands on average, how would we want to continue that aggression on the flop? What kind of sizings would we want to use? Is that something that's based more on our hand structure itself, something based more on position, on board textures? And I know that we could talk for probably hours about that topic, but just from a high level, kind of what are some of your thoughts on that?
So from a high level, I guess we're mixing sizings, and it's based on board textures. And so there's really kind of 3 board textures. You could have like a dry flop. You could have kind of a wet flop. And then you can kind of have that like in between. And so I would say you're going to use your sizings based on the flop texture. So In fact, I wouldn't even C-bet pot ever. That's not a sizing I'm using. I'm using like the 30 to 40 for the dry flops, the 50 for the medium flops, and then 2/3 pot to 80 pot with like a wet flop.
I think that makes sense. Yeah, that I feel like, at least in Hold'em for me, that helps me to be a little more or a little less transparent with some of my ranges. Since I'm only betting based on the board, it kind of is a built-in randomizer. So I'm not always betting the same amount with the same sort of hand. Not always betting X with, in the Hold'em example, betting a certain amount with an overpair, or always betting a smaller amount with a flopped, straight draw, something like that. I'm guessing the same would apply to PLO8 as well.
That's right. Yeah. I'd agree with that.
Awesome. Well, I think that we have covered quite a bit today between between all of us. I think some awesome content, awesome questions. Thank you, Ryan, for that question. And thank you, anyone else. I'm admittedly didn't get a chance to take a peek out to whoever else was viewing, but anyone who's viewing this live, we appreciate you riding along with us. We will be doing this again. I don't know if we have a date for episode 2, but we'll definitely be going into some more advanced topics, touching quite a bit more on some of the things we talked about today, diving more into depth, introducing some additional topics that we didn't have a chance to get to today. Adam, was there anything else that you wanted to cover? Anything that you wanted to shout out for the next episode? I think you had some possible news for the viewers that that might be of interest to them.
Yeah, I think that next episode we might do some actual like hand analysis and kind of break down even a myriad of spots. Maybe we'll have time for a couple hands, and do a review of a recent tournament I've played. And then I think we'll have a giveaway for the viewers, and we'll probably have some sort of requirement to how you can win that giveaway. Maybe ask the best question in the chat or something fun like that.
All right, a free roll.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you guys. I think with that we can go ahead and close this one out.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. It's been fun,
guys.
See you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you, everyone.